So we were talking about how people use Occam's razor to explain why there's no need to posit a god as a way of explaining natural or physical phenomena that we already have explanations for. That, you know, if we can use what we know about physics and evolutionary biology to explain why there is an Earth and how there could possibly have come to be sophisticated, complex, conscious life forms,
Mm-hmm.
then there's no need to posit an additional assumption of a god on top of those things, because that doesn't do any explanatory work, and
Mm-hmm.
it's making the entire theory more complex. And so Occam's razor says, cut it out.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing about this example is that a lot of people, I think, see God did it as a very simple hypothesis.
Right. I think part of the reason for that might be because it sounds simple. We're saying we're just giving it one word, God. But of course, there's a lot of stuff packed in there. God could, first of all, could be an extraordinarily complicated entity,
Mm-hmm.
and that actually might even be a very complicated concept, whatever that means. But we're using a simple word to describe it. Of course, we have to recognize that we could always take a complicated concept and give it a single word.
Right.
And it doesn't make it simpler just by giving it a simple word.
Right. With the case of the God explanation, I have another theory that people see they're inclined to think that things are simple if they're just sort of more familiar to us as human beings. That, like, we have a tendency to assume that if something happens, it happened because some other conscious entity wanted it to happen and made it happen. Because that's just a very natural and familiar explanation for us. That's how we're used to understanding and interpreting the world. But the idea of another conscious entity with intentions and motivations and emotions who's making things happen is actually, I mean, that's a very complex thing to exist. It just doesn't feel complex to us because we're so used to thinking about the world that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess this is all sort of getting to the question of what do we really mean by simplicity? If Occam's razor is about prioritizing simplicity in our explanations, well, it seems like that's actually a really ambiguous concept. So I'd be interested to hear about are there any like formalized ways of defining simplicity that people use?
Well, in the field of theoretical computer science, sometimes they talk about something known as Kolmogorov complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Kolmogorov complexity is a way of defining the complexity, which is sort of the reverse of simplicity, of, say, a string of bits or a string of numbers. And the basic idea is if you have a string of numbers, it could be finite or it could be infinite, either way. You could define its complexity to be the length of the shortest computer program that generates that string of numbers.
Mm.
Now, there's something really nice about this. It turns out this has nice theoretical properties, and it really, in some sense, does capture what we mean by complexity. But it also has some big problems. First of all, there's a problem that it can't be computed in many real cases. So you can't actually know what it is. So that's one problem. The second problem is it's actually language dependent. That is, so we're talking about the length of a computer program that took to generate this string, or the shortest length of any computer program that generates the string. But, well, when you write a computer program, you write it in some programming language. And if you switch programming languages, the length of the shortest computer program generating that string might actually change. So there's actually this deep ambiguity in the theory. And there is something which tells us that, in fact, this isn't such a big problem insofar as you only pay, the Kolmogorov complexity can only really change by sort of a constant when you switch languages, but unfortunately that constant can be really large. So this might actually be a gaping hole in the whole idea.